This is America on the Road, named Best Radio Show by the International Automotive Media Conference, and now in its 28th year on the air. Thanks for being with us as we bring you the latest automotive information from around the world. The company that makes iPhones is looking for a partner so it can begin to build electric cars, but it hasn't found one yet, and time is getting short. The clock is ticking. We'll have details and our thoughts on this multi-billion-dollar issue coming up. America on the Road is brought to you by Mercury Insurance and DrivingToday.com. If you're looking to save some money, you should switch to Mercury for your auto and home insurance. Californians save an average of $670 with Mercury, so imagine how much you could save. Got a quote today at DrivingToday.com/auto insurance. That's DrivingToday.com/auto-insurance. Also in the news this week, Tesla is slashing prices, then raising them. I mean, it's a frenzy going on at Tesla. Maybe you can help us sort it out, Chris. The net in the United States is lower prices for its two high-volume models than the prices were at the start of the year anyway. We'll have more on that coming up in a minute or two. The Inflation Act passed last summer was widely seen as a giant boon to union workers in America, but maybe not so much. Recent analysis shows that most of the jobs it will create could go to non-union workers. It might not be a bad thing. They're in America. They're Americans. I don't know that you need to be a union worker to get the benefits, so we'll talk about that. We'll have more details on that coming up. Our comments. I've already made a comment, haven't I, Chris?
You have.
Yes. Well, I am Jack Nerad. With me is co-host Chris Teague. Chris lives at one end of the country. I live at the other. Each week we get together to talk about cars, the car industry, how to save money on cars, get the most for your automotive dollar. Craziness now. We're into March. What's March like in Maine? Is it a great month or just a potentially horrendous month?
Well, you would think that we're kind of getting into spring, but we got a foot of snow on Saturday and got a good workout shoveling it all away. So things are white again for now. How about on your end of the world?
Well, amazingly, we've had tons of snow in Southern California. You know, some of it in the adjacent counties, San Bernardino County, Riverside County has gotten some snow. There's actually probably been some snow in Los Angeles County, too. Very, very rare. Nothing at my house, happily, but it's been kind of chilly. I've been playing some baseball over the weekend, and boy, I was so cold in the dugout the other day. It was crazy, but, you know, we'll see. It'll warm up. It won't. I bet it'll be warmer in midsummer in Maine than it is here. But that's just how it goes.
Yeah, who knows?
Well, what will you tell us about this week in terms of car testing, Chris?
I drove the 2023 Hyundai Kona EV, Jack. I think it's a good value. I can't wait to talk about it.
Well, and we are doing a Kona special this week, and I was driving the Kona N. And we can kind of compare notes here. I think this will be a nice little comparison. The N is one of the hottest hatchbacks on the market today. And I was blasting around Southern California, this thing. I having a great time. So I'll tell you what I discovered. You can tell me what you discovered about the EV, and we'll see who did best, who did worst, what we would recommend. A terrific guest we have for you today. Frank Hanley is the Senior Director of Auto Benchmarking at J.D. Power. And I'll tell you, if you want to know about cars, trucks, minivans, and SUVs, and which ones are most dependable, he is the guy to talk to. He knows all about this stuff. They have recently released the J.D. Power Vehicle Dependability Study for 2023, so this should be very useful. I mean, dependability is paramount, isn't it, Chris?
It is, and thankfully cars are getting more dependable as the time goes on, so hopefully there's a long list of vehicles to talk about.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk with him about that and find out chapter and verse. A lot of times, a car with a reputation for dependability isn't necessarily all that dependable. So that's useful to know, I think. You know, the real deal, that's what we're trying to present on America on the Road and, you know, at any one time. So hopefully that will help folks. Well, here's a thing we alluded to a little earlier, and it is Foxconn, of course, that builds iPhones. And now they're looking to do the same thing with electric vehicles. And they put a lot of pieces in place to do this. All they need is a vehicle to build, which is kind of a big thing. And, you know, a little different than the Apple situation and building iPhones, but they have purchased a big manufacturing plant that used to be a General Motors plant in Ohio. They're all set to gear up to build 200 to 300,000 vehicles a year. That's a ton of vehicles. They just need a vehicle to build, and they've had some talks with various companies, but it just hasn't panned out. I mean, what do you think about all this, Chris?
Well, I think it could bring much needed capacity to some of these automakers. I mean, if you look at, I mean, even Ford, as large as they are, they've had trouble keeping pace with demand for some of their EVs. Now, Ford isn't probably going to go to Foxconn to build their EVs, but you could see something like Rivian or Canoo or some other upstart company leaning on them for some overflow capacity. I mean, it could be a great thing.
Yeah, I think overflow capacity is the last thing some of these companies need because they can't build enough based on parts. And I think that's maybe one of the issues here. And one of the reasons maybe Foxconn can't find a partner is I think they were in discussions with Volkswagen, say, and on this whole Scout thing. And we'll maybe talk about Scout coming forward because Volkswagen has announced some more information on that. I think they were thinking Foxconn would build Scout for Volkswagen, and then Volkswagen has decided to go it alone. The Apple car is very far off, if ever. They might be in a world of hurt here, just trying to find a car company that's willing to step up to the kind of volumes that they are looking at. Of course, all of the 200,000 don't have to be one car. But when you have a big plant like that, you have to keep it utilized. I mean, those plants are hugely expensive, and they're hugely expensive to just have sit there.
It does seem like that particular location may be a little cursed, right? That's the Lordstown factory, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
so,
it's true.
Chevy shut it down, and then Lordstown Motors moved in and hasn't had the greatest luck there either. So maybe the location is just cursed. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, Foxconn is building some vehicles, I think, for some companies, but just small. Maybe Fisker is in there. I found this really interesting. This is what Foxconn told Reuters. We want to create a kind of ecosystem so anyone, for example, like United Airlines, can say, "I want to make a car," and they'll build it for them. Well, I don't know that how sensible that is. I mean, maybe. Somebody with a big brand maybe can go into the car business, but I don't think we need more car brands necessarily. And I don't think people are going to step up to electric cars built by United Airlines or marketed by United Airlines. Maybe I'm nuts.
Well, Domino's Pizza got into the car designing game a few years ago, so I wouldn't put it past an airline. But no, I think that it is kind of confusing to look and see who could fall into this as a partner. You mentioned Volkswagen, but they're looking at retooling some of their Chattanooga capacity and doing some work there. So I have nothing comes to mind, top of mind right away that screams that would be a good partner for Foxconn. I don't know.
Right. I mean, they do have a little piece of Lordstown Motors that you just talked about, and they're building the Endurance pickup truck. But beyond that, maybe Fisker, as I said, is going to step up. This is an interesting quote, I think, from Sam Fiorani in this Reuters story. In the EV market, everyone's eyes are bigger than their stomach. That's so true about pretty much everything in the car business, but certainly in EVs. And, there's a lot of money hanging out here. So we'll see. We'll see what happens on this. Well, on the Tesla side, Tesla builds its own cars. It doesn't rely on Foxconn or a third party to build their cars. And they are essentially discounting their cars. Something that the typical car company is very reluctant to do is change pricing on their cars, and especially over and over during the model year. But Tesla goes about things a different way. To set this up, Tesla missed its targets by 50% last year. So they want to do something to really jumpstart sales, and lowering prices seems like a logical thing to do. How do you feel about all this, Chris?
I mean, the two that they cut, right, the Model S and the Model X, these are, $100,000+ EVs as it is. So, I mean, these cuts are welcome for anybody who wants to buy a car. These cars still don't qualify for federal tax credits because of their prices. But earlier in the year, their price cuts made the Model Y eligible for the credits again. So, I mean, I think some of these are good things, even if it does look a little bit like egg on the face. Tesla's never been one to play exactly by the rules of model year changes and everything anyway, as you mentioned. So it's not all that surprising. I will say it is confusing, though, trying to keep up with when they've raised and where they've dropped and where they all fall out.
Right. The Model I, at least the top version of the Model I, is 16% cheaper than it was in early January. The rear drive Model 3 is about 9% cheaper. Those are significant savings because they're certainly not inexpensive vehicles, so that's a reasonable amount of cash. But and they're cutting prices all over the globe. So we'll see how that pans out for them. Builds them some more volume, I think. Certainly, we talked, and we've talked at kind of at length about the clean energy portion of the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed last summer, and it's provided all kinds of complications and wringing of hands and this and that. One of the things that a lot of people criticized it for was the fact that it. Some called it a giveaway to union workers, or this was something strictly designed to help UAW people and other union workers, maybe to help President Biden's reelection potential. Who knows? It turns out that's probably not exactly the result of this. I'm not sure whether this is a consequence they had realized or not, but it's likely to be of more benefit to companies that do business in red states, to do business in right-to-work states, and essentially import manufacturers. You have comments on that? What are your thoughts?
Well, without knowing the full scope of the story that you're talking about, I mean, I think that a lot of these automakers have already moved their locations or have built locations in these states because of the tax incentives, because of right to work to a degree. I think.
Yeah, and frankly, because they don't have to unionize, or they're not unionized.
Right. Because, so yeah, they avoid that expense and the hassle, I guess, from their perspective. But this whole thing has been a little bit of a story of unintended consequences. I think the pricing moves that we're seeing now are at least in some ways indirectly connected to that. Some of the supply chains changes that we're seeing, and automakers are moving factories here. So there could be a lot of other pieces that kind of fall out of this. It'll be interesting to see where the union work falls in that spectrum.
Right. Well, there's always something you don't expect, and it seems to happen. But what we do expect is to talk about the Hyundai Kona at some length in the next segment, in our road test segment. So stay with us for that. With Chris Teague, this is Jack Nerad with you, and join us right after the break for all the information you could ever use on the Hyundai Kona. Welcome back, everybody, to America on the Road with Chris Teague. Jack Nerad with you for road test time. And this is an unusual road test segment for us in that we're doing two versions of the same vehicle. You were driving the Hyundai Kona EV. I drove the Hyundai Kona N. We can compare and contrast, do all that stuff. But tell us about the Kona EV.
Yeah, I enjoyed the Kona EV. Excuse me. Like a few weeks ago, we talked about the Genesis GV60, which shares some parts with the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and then the Kia EV6. This is something completely different for Hyundai. It's actually an earlier EV. It's built into the Kona platform. It works really well that way. But so taking it back, pricing starts at around $35,000 for the base SE trim. My limited trim model started at around $43,000, a couple options, probably around $44,000 all in. It's got a 201 horsepower electric motor, 64 kilowatt hour battery pack, and a 258 mile range. Jack, I know this is sincerely much tamer than the one that you drove this past week. But have you driven the EV, and what do you think of the powertrain?
I have driven an EV, and I liked it. I thought they did a good job with it. I mean, as you mentioned, this is not a dedicated electric vehicle platform, as you can tell by the fact that I'm driving a vehicle and testing a vehicle in this segment that has a conventional engine. But I don't know that it has any negative effects on its EV performance. I think maybe I'd like a little more range than that. I mean, people seem to like ranges that start with the number 3 rather than the number 2. But that could be, depending on how you drive, that could be meaningless, really. Maybe 250 miles is just fine.
Yeah, it's not bad. And, even here in the cold weather, it sat during the snowstorm. But I've seen, I think once it all plays out, I'll end up with about 235, 240 miles of range with a full charge. Now, it's been a little warmer here for most of the week, not just in sub-zero temperatures. But in any case, I think the range is pretty accurate and it's reasonable. So I'll go with that. The EV is a little bit quicker than the standard gas Kona. It's a little 6.5 seconds, I think, to 60 miles an hour. nowhere near as quick as the Kona N, so it's not a sporty vehicle, but the battery is mounted low on the floor, so it does have that really cool go-kart kind of feel to it when you're driving around town, and it's a compact SUV, so there's not a lot of bulk sitting above you when you're riding. Using a level 3 charger, this thing will charge from 10 to 80% in around 47 minutes. Using a level 3 charger, it'll 50 kilowatt charger, I should say, from 10 to 80 in around 64 minutes. So it does do some pretty quick charging, not as fast as the Ioniq 5. It doesn't have the 800-volt architecture, so it's not going to be the super fast chargers of the newest EVs, but more than enough for my purposes, and I think for the price, you're getting what you pay for here. So the base trim comes with cloth inside. My limited trim tester has got heated and ventilated front seats, heated steering wheel. They also use a push button shifter in this vehicle, similar to the Tucson plug-in hybrid that I tested a few weeks ago. I refuse to love it. I don't know why we keep reinventing shift levers here, but after a few days in it, you do get the pattern because there are buttons placed in different places. Plenty of room up front, Jack. I think the kids in the back seat felt a little cramped. We talk a little bit about how tall I am every time at 6 feet tall. I did actually encroach on backseat space here. So if you have kids, if you have a dog, you need to carry larger items, the Kona is probably not the best family SUV for you. That said, my almost 75-pound golden doodle fit just fine in the back, although he probably felt a little cramped with his head against the back window. So it could do a little better if you have to haul a dog. 8-inch touchscreen comes standard with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. The limited trim I tested, 10.3-inch display. It gets an upgraded display. Comes with navigation and an 8-speaker Infinity sound system. The SUV missed a Top Safety Pick Plus award from the IIHS. I always have trouble saying that. But it does come with a full suite of safety features, and you can add to that as you move up the trim ladder there. So, Jack, at around almost 40 grand here, over 40 grand for the top trim that I tested. I think you get a good range, you get good features, you get good safety tech here. It's not as new or as advanced feeling as, like I said, the Ioniq 5 or the EV6, but I think the value's there, and I think for 258 miles of range, it's not that bad of a price.
Yeah, I mean, it's relative, isn't it? I mean, let's talk about that, because what this comparison harkens back to, I think, is last week when we were talking about hatchback versus small SUV and how similar they are. And I don't know whether you describe this as a hot hatch or a hatchback or an SUV. Maybe it depends on how you look at it and how they're pitching it. In terms of pricing, though, think of this. I was driving the hottest of these, with 286 horsepower, just a blast to drive, a lot of stuff on it, and its prices tested $35,000. So it's got, all the interior stuff that you would want. It's a hot car to drive. Very, very much fun, well sorted out, and not just big horsepower, but also, stuff to accompany that, active exhaust, adjustable dampers, that kind of stuff, besides the interior stuff that is special for the N. This is really kind of supposed to be the most special of the Konas, right? Wow, this is the one that really gets your heart pumping about this thing. And yet it's significantly less expensive than the electric vehicle, and no range anxiety, of course. I mean, what do you have to say about that? I mean, I'm not challenging you on EV. I'm not making you the EV advocate, but I'm just kind of curious as your take about which one you think is kind of cooler.
Well, I think the N is cooler, Jack. I mean, having driven both of them, the N to a much lesser degree. I mean, just from my enthusiast standpoint, the sound and the feel of a gas engine is more engaging to me from a performance standpoint. But now that we're talking about the price, I just looked up the price of the Chevy Bolt for a comparison. It's like $6,000, almost $8,000 cheaper to start. So, I mean, there is some other vehicles in the segment that could be a little cheaper, but for my money, I would take the N just because I like the performance. But I can see why, and I do promote the EV as a good value, even though it's more expensive than
and a complicating factor, I think, with the EV, and a thing that really is probably going to hit them hard in terms of sales, is the fact it doesn't qualify for the $7,500 tax credit that things like the Bolt does. that's really leaving them in a difficult spot because their base price is higher, and then they don't qualify for the tax credit. But I'm talking about the vehicle you were talking about. Let's talk a bit about the Kona N. Not only does it have 276 horsepower from this turbocharged engine, but it has this overboost function where you can push a button and you get 10 additional horsepower. I mean, that's video game like, or Fast and Furious F1, all of those things. Pretty cool. It will go from 0 to 60 in 4.8 seconds, pretty reliably. So that's nice and quick. This is just a fun car to drive in so many ways. It has the right stuff: Pirelli P0 summer tires, 19-inch wheels. It looks great, I think. For that kind of car, it's not necessarily super macho, but I think they do it up right. 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, as I said, with all this horsepower and the additional overboost. You pay for it a little bit in terms of fuel economy: 20 miles per gallon in the city, 27 miles per gallon on the highway. You get significantly more in the standard Kona. And of course, if you buy the EV, you never buy gas at all. I mean, it has a very, very great kind of fuel economy portion. Inside, cool looking. They use blue as their color. That's their kind of power color. A lot of companies use blue to represent, EV. So interesting, but they have a performance blue inside. Stitching and various things have a blue look to them. As you mentioned, passenger space in the rear seat is not really great for adults for long periods of time. Great for kids. I think this is a great car for singles, for a young couple, for a young guy, young woman who wants to have a performance car and not pay a ton of money for it. I mean, even $35,000 is quite a bit of money for a subcompact car. But I think there's a lot to like that. And it also has these big infotainment screens and big digital gauges, 10.3 inches both, and side by side. I mean, that's almost a luxury type presentation. I mean, they do a really nice thing with infotainment, don't they, Chris?
They do. I love Hyundai's infotainment. Some people knock it for being a little more simplistic, but for me, that makes it easier to navigate. It makes it less distracting while you're driving, and it just makes the whole thing easier to use. But you're right. The Kona N is a great car. I chose the GTI over it just because I like the seats better. But I think from the performance standpoint, the N is a better performer.
Ah, interesting. Well, and I'm sure Volkswagen would love to hear that. Well, there you go. Well, when we come back, we'll have a terrific interview for you. Frank Hanley is Senior Director of Auto Benchmarking for J.D. Power. If you want to know what cars, trucks, minivans, and SUVs are the most dependable, he's the guy. So stay with us for that interview. And we'll be right back right here on America on the Road. Welcome back to America on the Road. This is Jack Nerad with you. We have a terrific guest for you. You're talking about something that's really important. It's vehicle dependability. I mean, I can't think of anything much more important. Maybe safety, but certainly vehicle dependability is a big one. Frank Hanley is Senior Director of Benchmarking at J.D. Power. We talk with the J.D. Power folks all the time because they are the voice of the customer. They really understand what's going on from the customer point of view. And Frank, number one, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to be here.
Well, you do a study each year, you being J.D. Power, does a study of vehicle dependability. Been doing it for decades now. And it talks about, I guess, 3-year-old vehicles, right? And tell us a bit more about what the study does.
Yeah, so the study recontacts customers who have had their vehicles for 3 years now, asking about different types of problems they've had over those 3 years with the vehicle. Have they had any transmission, engine issues that are, fairly major, where we're talking breakdown, or, are we talking some other things like, hey, they're having radio issues, where we're having issues with the Bluetooth connectivity in their phone and stuff. So it covers a wide variety of topics, the study.
So is the industry getting better or worse? Are cars getting better or worse from a dependability standpoint?
We do see an improvement this year in the vehicle dependability. We see about a 3% improvement in the number of problems people are having year over year. So, good, steady, continuous improvement we're seeing from the industry as a whole.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. It strikes me, and I had a chance to look at a little bit of this information, that infotainment stuff is still very problematic. Yeah, shake your head about it, right?
Yeah, it's there's definitely some issues going on with infotainment for customers. I mean, it's the #1 category area where customers are having problems. It's actually double the next area that we talk about. So I mean, it's very still problematic in the industry. We did see a slight improvement year over year in the area, but like I said, still double what the other areas are. So still very problematic. So lots of opportunities for improvement for the industry there.
And in this kind of issue, I think it's problems with systems that are working properly, but people don't understand how to work them, more so than problems with the systems themselves, or failure of the systems. Am I right?
Yeah. So what we're still seeing is a lot of, I mean, voice recognition is still very problematic in the industry. It has been for years. One of the big areas we're seeing an increase in now is Android Auto CarPlay. So as that new technologies, it's really coming to the market when you think about 2020 model year vehicles starting on the rise. So year over year, we do see an increase in that area where customers are having problems with the connectivity, both wired and Bluetooth connection for the Android Auto CarPlay. So that is an area on the rise, definitely very problematic. Customers like to use it because it gives them up-to-date maps and everything, and and off-board voice recognition, but very problematic for them. So.
Yeah, I mean, we love to use our phones, and it's terrific when it works. And I'm lucky enough to drive a lot of test cars where I can get it to work. But I also experience problems, getting it to connect or keeping it connected. And I think a lot of people are experiencing that same thing.
Yeah, it's really, that's what it is. I mean, they can get it paired that first time, but we're seeing a lot of inconsistencies when you get back in your car. For some reason, it just doesn't repair. So customers are, really confused as to why one time do I get in the car, does it work totally fine? And then the next time I get in the car, it just doesn't connect at all, and I got to sit and play with it. So it's that inconsistency that's, really frustrating to customers.
I think back in the day, we used to see problems with mechanical portions of the car, engine problems, overheating, those kind of things. They largely seem a thing of the past, or pretty much. Am I right there?
Yeah, I mean, those are, the days of cars being broken down on the side of the road, we're past that. I mean, we're seeing definite real improvements in that area in the industry. And that's where customers, expectations with what dependability is anymore and what it means is changing. It used to be like, does my car not break down anymore? But like we said, they don't. So now it's those things like, is it holding up like I expected to? So is there more squeaks and rattles? Is the technology staying fresh, or is it becoming dated? So we are definitely seeing a shift as to how customers are thinking about dependability from what we saw in the past back in, the 80s and 90s, where it was, am I stuck on the side of the road? I got to call somebody.
Right. And you're talking about vehicles here that are, 3 model years old, right? So, and some of those might have technology that dates back another 4 or 5 years, perhaps, given the generation and how the auto industry works. So you could be looking at something that maybe is close to 10 years old in terms of technology. I mean, that gets to be pretty dated the way we're moving forward, doesn't it?
Exactly. And that's where we're really now seeing with the opportunity, and especially with Tesla with their over-the-air updates, and how they have the ability to keep that infotainment system up to date when they send those new software packages to customers. So we are seeing that does help a lot with keeping the vehicle fresh for customers. So the other manufacturers have a lot of catching up to do with Tesla to get those updates out there to keep those radio fresh compared to what Tesla's doing right now.
Yeah, and certainly they're rushing to do that. A lot of vehicles that I test now, tout the fact that they have over-the-air update capability. So making that happen is important. Let's talk about Tesla a bit. I mean, Tesla has been kind of on the periphery of what you've been doing at JD Power for a while. They don't necessarily let you have access to some of the information that maybe other manufacturers do. Talk about Tesla's results, would you?
So Tesla this year, not though officially rankable, we do collect the data from the customers we can with unrestricted states. So what we're seeing right now is they aren't performing great in the industry right now. They're not the worst by far. They definitely have a unique set of issues though compared to what we're seeing by the other manufacturers. So like we mentioned earlier, infotainment is very problematic for the industry as a whole, but when you actually look at Tesla, it's actually not. Where they're seeing a lot of their problems are areas like driving assistance. So, I mean, obviously it's a brand known for its autonomy and all of its safety systems and stuff. So what we're really seeing is their customers are having a lot of problems with it not working and understanding how to use it. And then also issues with manufacturing has always been kind of a problem for Tesla, to say the least.
Kind of the nuts and bolts of putting a car together, right?
Yeah. So that's where their next biggest area is exterior. So, I mean, what we're seeing now is a lot of areas that are grading in the exterior. And one of the biggest issues, probably not a surprise when you don't have an engine making noise, and sealants and stuff start to break down. We're seeing elevated wind noise and road noise issues now as those vehicles age. So some unique problems for Tesla compared to others in the industry being an electric vehicle.
Yeah, and they're below industry average, I think, if they were to be ranked, right?
They are below industry average if they were ranked. They weren't at the bottom of the survey, but yes, they are below industry average if they were rankable.
Let's go to the other end of the rankings and talk about the top ones, because some interesting, I think, results this year. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we had some big changes in the ranking this year. So the number one brand this year was Lexus. They've been at the top of our ranking 8 of the past 10 years. They were not there last year, but returned to the top spot this year. The number one mass market brand was Kia. They were number one last year overall in the industry. They think to third in the industry overall, but is still the number one mass market brand. And they actually won 3 awards overall. When we look at the awards overall, it was very interesting year this year. Also, there were 4 corporations that took all of the awards. So Hyundai Motor Corporation, Toyota, General Motors, and BMW were the 3 corporations that won awards this year for their different brands. So it was interesting to see that four corporations are taking all the awards, which does not usually happen. Usually it's spread out throughout the industry, but those are, very strong quality leaders that we saw and all rose to the top.
Yeah, let's talk about at the model level. Some interesting vehicles, I think, at the top. Maybe not extremely mainstream, but tell us about them.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, General Motors is still doing very well with its trucks and SUVs, with how they're winning the awards overall. BMW is really also winning for its premium SUVs there. Kia is winning for its small cars. So we have the Kia won for the Forte for their compact car, the Optima for their midsize car, and the Sportage for its compact SUV. BMW did win 3 awards, like I mentioned, the 4 Series, the X2, and the X5. And then their brand Mini also won for the Mini Cooper for compact sport car. As I mentioned, General Motors did win 4 overall. So the Chevrolet Blazer, the Silverado HD, so their heavy duty truck, as well as the Tahoe. And then on the GMC side, the Sierra won for their light duty pickup. So GM doing very well with their trucks and SUVs. And then on the Toyota side, they won 6 awards overall. Lexus wins 2 with the Lexus NX and RX. And then the Toyota CHR, Highlander, Sienna, and Tacoma also placed at the top of their segments. So you can see that those 4 corporations all cleaned up this year. So it's pretty impressive.
Right. There's a brand that seemed to be fairly conspicuous by its absence in this, and maybe for the last couple of years, and that's Honda. Can you comment on Honda a little bit?
Honda's had a rough couple of years. What we're really seeing right now with them is, they're still very strong in powertrain issues. But what we're really seeing is their infotainment, and they have a high penetration of those driving assist features. So, it's a brand known for, safety. So they're putting those driving assistance features like lane keeping and forward collision warning on their cars at a very high rate. And it's just a big learning curve for their customers. So they're getting a lot of problems reported there. So kind of unique problems for Honda, struggling a little bit for those 2 areas. But, the rest of the car still remains very strong for that brand.
Yeah, I think, people can be annoyed by those features, especially when they don't quite understand what they're doing, those driver assistance features that, might buzz the steering wheel or, give them, urge them back into the lane, things like that. That could be problematic for them, I think.
Yeah, and that's what we're really seeing. It's a lot of those alerts that they're getting that they feel they're, overly sensitive. going off when there's nothing in the road, or I mean, what we're seeing too is a lot of them, like you said, buzz the steering wheel. Some are actually chiming if you cross the line into another lane. So, I mean, if you think about that on your normal driving, it constantly buzzes, chirping and things at you. It can get annoying. And I mean, especially if other people in your car, all of a sudden it's, warning them, hey, the driver just left their lane a little bit. So
Right.
making everybody
And you
else
can start to ignore that over time, I think, if you're hearing those too often. So it really is kind of a balancing act to get those things to work properly.
Exactly. And what we're seeing is even people are just shutting them off. So they put them on their cars, manufacturers put them on their cars thinking, hey, it's making my car safer, but then customers are getting annoyed with it. So they just shut them off completely. So it's kind of a really lost opportunity there for them.
Anything else that you think consumers should know about the vehicle dependability survey or study from J.D. Power?
Yeah, I mean, just that the industry it's still getting better. I mean, it's really year after year we see continuous improvement. So cars are definitely getting better out there, which is always good.
Yeah, very good, and makes used cars maybe a better value than ever.
Exactly, that's just it. In the long run, the longer you keep them, I mean, because we're seeing people keeping their cars a lot longer, so they're maintaining their value and their quality. So that's good.
Well, Frank Hanley of J.D. Power, thanks so much for being with us. We do appreciate it. Great insight. I learned a lot.
No problem. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having us.
And stay with us, everybody. We'll be right back right here on America on the Road. Welcome back to America on the Road with Chris Teague, Jack Nerad with you for our final segment. The time flies when we're having fun talking about cars, and I enjoy doing that with Chris each week. This is question and answer time, too. This is listener question time, and I think we've got some really good listener questions, so maybe we'll dive right in. Last week, this comes from John in Granada Hills, California. Last week, you talked about range extenders, is what John says. I read that the upcoming Ram 1500 EV will offer a range extender. What do you know about that? What do you think about it?
I actually don't know much, to be honest with you, but I will tell you that for a truck like that, I think it's a great thing, especially when you're going to be doing some towing or hauling. A lot of people tow for longer distances. So I'm all on board for it for the pickup truck. I think it's a great addition. Jack, you might know a little more about the specs than I do.
Well, it's kind of interesting, too. I don't know that was initially released, and then Ram CEO Mike Koval was doing an interview, and I think he tipped his hand a little bit. He said that there would be a range extender option, and then some follow-up has indicated that there would be a range extender, which means a combustion engine aboard that will recharge the truck's battery. And we talked about this, at some length, I think, in question and answer last week. It's currently not an option on other EV trucks. It had a little kind of a blip of fame and then kind of faded out. But I think in this kind of installation, it will make a lot of sense from a use case version. From a regulation version, though, I think it could be not nearly as good, and it might come and haunt some people who think they're buying an EV and are looking for EV tax credits to find out that they have a plug-in hybrid sitting in the driveway.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this last week too. It's so confusing to talk about it from an automaker's perspective. They're pitching it as an EV with a range extender, but like you said, from a regulatory perspective, the law probably, nobody knows for sure yet, but the law probably looks at this like a plug-in hybrid. So would not be surprised to see that.
We were having dinner with some neighbors on last weekend, and they were really excited. I mean, this guy has just bought a Ram 1500 full-size pickup truck, loves it. His favorite vehicle, he is just over the moon over his conventional vehicle, but is looking at this as maybe the next vehicle on, and is really excited about the fact that there is a range extender. So I think from a consumer benefit standpoint and from a sales standpoint, there's a lot to like about this idea. I think Ford is looking at that maybe for the Lightning, but that's certainly not what they're pitching on the Lightning now. And it's not available on the Lightning, but maybe it's an advancement or enhancement coming up. It's a really interesting idea, but I don't think the regulations are keeping up with it. This is not going to be treated like a zero-emission vehicle.
No, but like I said earlier, the more I think about this, the more I think it is a perfect accompaniment for a pickup truck. I mean, maybe, Ford released the Lightning and, the Silverado. Everybody's releasing an EV pickup truck, but maybe the plug-in hybrid was the next logical step for some of these things.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people are looking at plug-in hybrids as the stepping stone to EVs. Maybe EVs are the stepping stone to plug-in hybrids. I don't know. Again, regulations have to keep up with that, and we'll see what Ford does in terms of. I mean, certainly Ford wants to jealously guard all the volume they have with F-150 and with Lightning. So, do they offer a range extender going forward? I mean, that's something to speculate about. That's for sure. Could be fascinating to see what happens there. And you've experienced the fact that, range goes drastically down in cold weather. So the ability to use a gasoline engine to keep that battery charged without going, oh man, where am I going to find that supercharger, is a big deal.
Yeah, and we've talked about how much slower EVs charge in the cold weather too. So if you're on a road trip or you're, out somewhere, the range extender could be a great thing, right? You don't have to, first of all, you don't have to stop, like you say, every time you get low in range, you can just keep going because you have the gas engine on board, but it does take some of the pressure off there too. Tesla's opening up some of their supercharger network, as you mentioned just a minute ago, but even the extra chargers don't do enough to fill out the charging network yet. So I'm on board with it, like I said. So I can't wait to see how it is implemented and then how it is regulated.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see. Well, let's take another question. Stan in Manitowoc, Wisconsin says this. Maybe I'm an old guy. I know I am an old guy. But Stan, apparently, maybe he's not as old as I am, or maybe he's a lot older. I don't know. But he still likes the idea of buying a sports car. I'm looking at the Dodge Challenger, Chevy Camaro, and Ford Mustang, obviously a domestic vehicle fan. Which of these three do you think I should pick? What do you say to Stan?
I think it depends on what you want to do with your muscle car, right? If you want to go real fast in a straight line, the Challenger is your guy, right? It's really hard to beat the Hellcat in a straight line. I think, if you're doing road course, you're driving sort of autocross type events, the Camaro is a great choice. GM's chassis tuning is fantastic. The car is hard to see out of on the road, but it is a wonderful handler on the track and it feels great. And the Mustang kind of mixes both of those, right? So Mustang's got a more comfortable interior. I think that both of them a little bit better tech in some trims or whatever. And you can still get it in the high-end GT500 if you want it. And so you have a supercharged V8 at your disposal should you want it. So you can also get the Mustang in a four-cylinder, which, as we talked about in previous episodes, is a value. I mean, it's a great value. So I think it really depends on which avenue you want to take.
Yeah, and some of these midline models I think are terrific values too. I think if you don't have to go to the top of the Ford Mustang array to get a really good vehicle with tons of horsepower. And I think the same is true with the Challenger. I guess across the board, there are some nice vehicles, fun to drive. You don't have to have the top vehicle that's just kind of nuts, like the Hellcat, maybe way beyond what Stan would want. But if you got a Challenger RT with close to 400 horsepower or so, probably have a blast and a very practical 5-passenger vehicle. It is a 2-door. What's a 2-door? Young people don't even understand what a 2-door is, but I think that's a pretty good choice for them. And mid-level Mustangs, I think, are terrific too. Mustang GT, I think, is one heck of a value.
I agree.
Well, let's take a third question. Asa in Gary, Indiana says this. When I'm reading vehicle reviews, I sometimes see the reviewer refer to summer tires. I've heard of snow tires, but what the heck are summer tires?
Yeah, summer tires have a somewhat softer rubber compound, and they do better at channeling water than winter tires. So what that does is when it's warmer outside, they provide better grip on the concrete. On the asphalt, I should say. But when it gets cold outside, the rubber compounds are not as pliable. They can harden. And in some places here, like when we reach the single-digit temperatures, they can even crack. So if you can imagine driving along on a summer tire and cracking, you can see how that would be dangerous. And on the other hand, when we talk about winter tires, those rubber compounds are designed to stay pliable and stay soft when it's very cold outside. So, I think a lot of people, myself included, switch back and forth even here in Maine, but anything below 40 degrees on a regular day, you're going to want to not be driving on summer tires.
Now, are you switching to summer tires or do you switch to all seasons in the summer? Because, I mean, the typical tire on most cars and SUVs, for that matter, is an all-season tire.
In most cases, in most vehicles, I've switched between a winter and an all season, but for the GTI, I'm going to switch back to a Pirelli summer tire that we're testing. It came from the factory with Pirelli all season, so I will say that it has not yet been on summer rubber.
Well, that'll be cool. And, you know,
Yeah.
you're going to get more performance out of the performance tire, because really a summer tire is more like typically a performance tire. Well, that's the end of the show, but not the end of the things we have to say to you. Chris, tell us about yourtestdriver.com.
Yes, so for the month of March and April, we're running a giveaway on yourtestdriver.com. We have a one-day pass to the Team O'Neill Rally School here in New Hampshire, or next door in New Hampshire. At the same time, for everybody else who doesn't live in the sticks like I do, we're giving away a Skip Barber Racing School pass to any one of their locations. So we can get you guys behind the wheel. It'd be a great Father's Day gift, a great Mother's Day gift, or anyone a birthday present. So head to yourtestdriver.com. I'm going to put up the article today, so it'll be up by the time you guys hear this, and you can see all the rules there.
Look for that. I have been through the Skip Barber course. It is terrific. You're going to want to win that thing. You know, look at Your Test Driver and check that out, and check out Skip Barber. Really cool stuff. I'd love to take that off-road course too, but I haven't been able to do that. I'd like to encourage people to check out my newest book, Dance in the Dark. It is a crime thriller. It's inspired by true crime. And of course, true crime, or studying true crime, is a passion of mine. So I tried to make Dance in the Dark as realistic as possible and as suspenseful as possible too. So look for that. Our thanks to you for listening to America on the Road on this radio station or on the podcast in which you're listening to this. Please join us again next week and pass the show along to people. Let them know what radio station you listen to, and let them listen there, or pass the podcast along to them. That would be terrific. And it's available on the SportsMap radio website. You can figure out where the podcasts are. So we appreciate you being with us right here on America on the Road, and we hope you'll join us again next time for another edition of America on the Road.